When you have the ability to choose what's true to you, then you become more of who you are. And when you show up as the most authentic version of yourself, that's when you're really pouring your best self into the world.
Hey there, beautiful soul. Welcome to Cultivate Your Joyful Life, where we believe true fulfillment blooms from within. I'm Emily Liu, your certified life coach, and I'm on a mission to help you create a life you freaking love. In a world where we constantly juggle priorities from career to parenting, relationships to health, it's easy to feel overwhelmed or not enough. But don't worry, in this corner of the universe, I'm here to share practical tips and inspiration to help you access your inner joy right now. So, grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's cultivate your joyful life together. Here we go. Hello. Welcome to another episode. You're going to love this episode as I'm bringing on Michael Quan. I'll read his bio in just a bit. But what I love about Michael is not only is he the most humble and nice person on this planet, he has written a workbook planner on how to achieve FIRE and what it is. And I actually was reading this book that I purchased off of Amazon, and I'll link it in the show notes. After this episode, I highly recommend that you go grab it because it's written in such a way that takes a very complex, like if money, graphs, charts, financial numbers scare you, budgeting scares you, you're going to really enjoy what this episode is about, and also this workbook planner, because it just breaks it down into such simple, easy to digest layman terms that make this really scary concept so tangible for everyone. I feel like when you think about financial independence or the term financial independence, you might think it's something reserved for just the top 1%, or you have to be really wealthy or have the last name Waldorf to be able to obtain financial independence. But as you'll learn through this episode, it's really designed for everyone. It just takes some deliberate, intentional actions and some calculations. And we're going to dive into all of that today. Now, let me introduce you to Michael Quan. He's a personal finance educator, a financial business coach, and a speaker based in San Diego, California. His mission is to help others achieve financial freedom while ensuring they find joy in the journey. Michael achieved FIRE, financial independence retirement early, at the age of 36 through a combination of saving and investing, entrepreneurship, and real estate investing. He's been featured in media outlets such as Good Morning America, Business Insider, Market Watch, Yahoo Finance, MSN, and the Huffington Post. Michael spent a decade working with teens through the Tony Robbins Foundation and is the co-founder of YES, Youth Entrepreneur Summit. When he's not helping others, he enjoys spending quality time with his wife and 2 children. He is an avid fisherman, a tennis player, a world traveler, a foodie, and a tech junkie. Ooh, I can see we touched on all of these topics in this one episode. All right, let's get into the episode. Michael, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm super excited, and I love your podcast. It's been amazing listening to the past several episodes.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I know everyone's going to love this episode because I feel like money is such a juicy topic. And I love the FIRE movement. I think I stumbled across it whenever Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek came out. Mm-hmm. That's when I started learning about FIRE, and I've just been following it ever since. So it's been over a decade, and I love that you've written a whole book about it, which we're going to get into. But I want to just start off with some icebreaker questions so our audience can get to know you. So first question is, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles, California. Yeah, and I moved down.
Where do you live now?
I'm in San Diego, yes. I moved down here for school and never left after that.
Okay, so I'm guessing that's your favorite.
I do enjoy it down here, yes. It's quite nice.
Yeah. So there's a running joke because my husband is from LA, and all my friends in Arizona, hands down, would rather go to San Diego rather than LA. To me, I just think it's much more calm and easy, and the commute is easier.
And the weather's a little bit better as well. And we've got all the beaches. So it's nice.
Yeah. I've never heard anyone complain about San Diego. All right, second question is, what kind of career titles have you held?
Ooh, different career titles. I've had many, probably upwards of 20, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but I've done everything from serving food at the dorms. I've done things like doing data entry. I've built websites. I've been a coach. I've been a um, owner, a CEO, if you will, of an IT company. I've been a educator. I've been a public speaker. I've been a podcaster. Yeah, just the list goes on. But yeah, I've had a few different
Yeah.
experiences along the way.
A lot of different lives you've lived,
I
and
have.
hopefully career pivoters are listening to this and be like, wow, I can make career transitions possible. That's awesome. What's your favorite cuisine?
Ooh, this is a hard one. So one of my favorite things, actually, okay, really quickly, take a step back. I was actually also a food blogger for several years. So I
Hmm.
actually ran a blog in San Diego. And so I got to go try lots of different foods. But I think my favorite has to be some of the best street foods out there. So like there's some
Mm.
really good Mexican seafood that's available down in San Diego. And I think that's one of my favorite.
Love it. Okay. By the way, my very first blog I ever started was a food and travel blog as
Ah,
well,
nice.
called Happy and Full.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that
Have
name.
you been to, thank you. Have you been to Portland
I
by
have.
chance?
Yes.
Okay. They have an amazing like street food scene, food truck scene.
Yeah. All the pods. Yeah. I remember the pods and we went around to
Mm-hmm.
the different ones. And I remember there was a specific one, the Thai, I think it was a chicken cart. It was like a kind of like a Singaporean type of a chicken, but it was a street food. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Awesome, awesome. Okay. What's your favorite way to spend a weekend?
Ooh, favorite way to spend a weekend? I like to do some fishing. So a great way for me to enjoy my weekend would be to wake up early. I'll go fishing really
Mm.
quickly, come back in time for the kids to be awake and my wife, and then we'll do something as a family. They usually have activities, and we'll maybe do something later on, have a nice meal together, and yeah, just be together and be present. I think that's my ideal weekend, is just being together with my family. They're relatively young still. My daughter is 12, my son is 10, and so just trying to absorb all the time while I can while they're young. And I know you have young kids as well, and my kids are a little bit older, but it goes fast. It goes fast.
Yeah, I hear that. That's really cool. I imagine you're quite a patient person to enjoy fishing.
I'm pretty patient,
Is that a
yes.
cool?
I would say that's
Okay.
an attribute. That's what people would say.
Awesome, awesome. Final question is, what drives you to wake up every morning?
Ooh, life is just, I feel incredibly blessed in my life. And so I feel like life is a gift. And so it's like when I
Mm.
wake up, it's just like, I'm so excited to like, see what's next. And I've just been incredibly blessed in my life. So I feel like there's just adventure around every single corner. Sometimes I don't know where it's going to
Mm.
appear, but things just consistently appear when I show up and I'm serving in some sort of a form of contribution, or I'm growing or something to that degree. And it's, yeah, I just get excited to wake up and get the day started.
I love that. I can see it all over your face. All right, so I want to talk about FIRE for those that are new to this acronym. And can you just explain it like I'm five? What is FIRE?
Yeah. So FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And to be honest, even though I was on the FIRE path, is what we kind of call it, they didn't necessarily have a term back when I was doing it. And all that means is that you're working to build enough wealth so that you have financial independence. And all that financial independence means is that you've built up enough assets so that you have enough passive income coming in to cover your expenses. So let's just say, for example, we'll take some round numbers. Let's say you have expenses of $8,000 every single month, and you're able to build some sort of a portfolio, or maybe it's a collection of rental homes or combination thereof, and you have enough where you have $8,000 of passive income, then all of a sudden you're financially independent because you no longer have to work for the money anymore. So that's the first part of FIRE
Mhm.
is the financial independence. So when you are financially independent, then all of a sudden work becomes optional. And that's where the retire early piece kind of kicks in. And then you have the option of retiring early. And so that's something that I did. I was able to retire early at the age of 36. And you have lots of options and what you get to do after that.
Yeah, I really like that. And in your book, I remember you saying like you could retire and live the beach life and do that. But what I think a lot of people actually end up doing is they just almost look at it as like FU money. Like I now have the freedom to choose however I want to spend my day or create what I actually want to create. And I find like a lot of people who are in FIRE, they actually end up working a little bit more because they're like so excited about what they're building and the value that they're putting out. And so now that you're like you've retired early, quote unquote, at 36, like what do you do to spend your time?
That's a great question. And even though I may not look like it, I've actually been now retired early for 10 years. So over the last 10 years, it's been quite a journey of doing a number of different things, exploring different types of opportunities, starting up other businesses, doing coaching, creating content, building a podcast, writing the book, lots of different things in between. But most importantly, I'll tell you, Emily, the most important thing that I've seen in the last 10 years is that it gave me the freedom to go on a personal development journey that I wouldn't have been able to do
Mm.
otherwise. And I was able to do it with such freedom and flexibility that, it just allowed me to grow. And that's where, I said earlier that I feel so blessed because as I've gone through this journey and learning how to grow and contribute at a higher level, it's very fulfilling because I'll tell you in the beginning when I first started out in this FIRE journey, it was more about the money, right? And I know you talked about in your previous episode, why you love money. Money's just a
Mm.
tool and it's a means to an end, right? And so I was after this, number to retire early, so to speak, right? And when I got there, then it's like, okay, well, now what? Because as you get to anything in life, right, you're either growing or you're dying in some form or fashion, right? Either growing up or you're going down, right? It's not really this plateau where you can just kind of skim along, right? I think as humans, we're designed to grow. And so when you get there, you kind of have to make a choice. And the great thing is that when you have the freedom to do that, you can explore lots of different things. And so I spent a lot of time exploring Tony Robbins seminars, and I've done a lot of volunteering. I do a lot of work with teens, and so it's just really fulfilling to be able to kind of explore that. And so, yeah, over the last 10 years, it's just been an amazing journey of finding out more of who I am and where ultimately I want to spend
Mm.
my time. Because as you said, even though you can retire early, and don't get me wrong, I spent some time just messing around. Right, I went fishing in Panama. I went like doing all these
Mm-hmm.
things that I wanted to do, checking off things off the bucket list, and that's great. But after that, it's like, okay, well, now what, right? And so I was very present with my family. I was off doing some of these other things, trying to just figure things out. So I tell people the retirement early piece of FIRE is a lot of times what attracts people because a lot of times we're dissatisfied where we're at and we want to gravitate towards something that really calls to us, and that's great. I think that's a great motivator,
Mm.
and don't get me wrong, you should, I think, drive to that place and that opportunity. And when you get there, just a heads up, it just doesn't stop right there, right? You don't just coast along and
Yeah.
be like, okay, sail off into the sunset. That's the movies.
Yeah. I think what you just hit on there is like the whole survival versus thriving. Like the money and the freedom that it buys is really what allows you to thrive. So you're not operating from this scarcity place of like, I need to take on this client even though it's misaligned. But now you get to like really choose and create the life that you want and be of service in a greater way. So, like for anyone listening right now that's any kind of service provider or coach, I almost feel like it's your duty to try to become as financially independent as possible so that you can really be clean in your energy with what you decide to say yes to or what you decide to say no to as well.
That's so well put, Emily, because what you said, listeners, I really want you to pick up what Emily said. When you have the ability to choose what's true to you, then you become more of who you are. And when you show up as the most authentic version of yourself, that's when you're really pouring your best self into the world.
Mm. Yeah, so beautiful. And that's naturally, I think, what leads you to just live a fulfilling life that you're so blessed to have. Like, I can see it because you've been able to create it through your deliberate decisions. So let's circle back to, how did you discover what FIRE is
Yeah, so
before it was fire?
I had mentioned earlier, I didn't necessarily know the term fire back in the day, but I was blessed in the sense that I had a couple of uncles when I was younger that had figured out how to build wealth. And one of them was a very successful entrepreneur. He owned multiple companies. And then I had another uncle that was a dentist and he owned his own practice, but he purchased lots of real estate. And so I
Mm.
watched them. And as a young kid, I was just always curious, like, why are they always home with their kids? And like, how come they don't really have to go to work? Like my parents had to go to work.
Mm.
And it just happens that, my cousins, their father, we were, best of friends. So I was always hanging out at my uncle's house. And naturally you start to kind of absorb some of the things. I would go to some of the rental properties and we would do like, random work, like help them install like a toilet or something, right? It's like, why are we even doing this, right? And I started to realize like later on in my life, oh, he had built this portfolio of properties that pays him cash flow that he doesn't necessarily have to work for. And so that was my first kind of like hint that there was another
Mm.
opportunity out there, that I didn't have to go down a traditional 9 to 5 career path in order to live the life exactly as I want to live it. And so that was very attractive to me because for me, I was always someone that, especially in school, like I was undeclared in college for like until they told me you need to declare a degree, otherwise we're kicking you out. And so I finally declared economics because they had the fewest number of requirements, so I could like exit
Yeah.
school. Anyway, long short of it was that I always wanted to, do my own thing and choose. And I didn't want to just choose one thing. That was the other piece of it. I didn't want to have one set career. I wanted to be able to
Mm.
choose different things. One of the things I value a lot is variety and being able to,
Yeah.
have the spice of life by, experiencing different things. And I think, yeah, being able to see my uncles do that in their own lives gave me that inspiration, knowing that, hey, this is possible. And once I realized that it was possible, then I started to really dig into some of the tactical piece, the strategic piece, by reading tons of books. So picking up the book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then after that
Mm.
one, you get even more excited. Then after that, you want to go deeper. And then you pick up other books that talk about, how to buy and sell stocks, how to build a business. And if you put yourself and immerse yourself in that environment, you start to absorb a new language, a new way of thinking. And the people that are generally consuming that type of information have a general understanding of what's possible. The longer you stay in that community, you'll start to see patterns of the people that are successful. And so the great thing
Mm.
about that is once you see that, then you can just model them and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so that's what I did. I simply modeled what I saw was working, what was successful. And I started a business of my own. And thankfully it was successful the first go at it, first time
Yeah.
around. But then I used that to then, purchase cash flowing real estate later on. And all the way through, I was investing a portion of my income, always constantly, automatically taking it out of my salary, no matter how much I was making, whether it was like $40,000 all the way up to when I was making much more than that. I was always taking out a
Yeah.
very specific portion.
I love all of that and how fortunate you are to have a role model so early on. Like, I think a lot of people may not have that, especially if they are like first generation immigrants and, it's just not modeled to them. Like, all they see is the parents working, or like the traditional model of like, go to college, get a degree, work for the man, and see that. But I really love what you shared there too about just absorbing the books, because there's role models like throughout the library, but also today with podcasts, with YouTube videos, like all the information is out there at your disposal. And I heard someone say like the best life hack is just picking up a book, because maybe you can attest to this because you've actually written a book, but like I heard a book is like the best information that somebody has and the best knowledge they have, like crammed into like this one piece of like published book, because they want to impress and like give their best to everybody in the world. So let's talk about that. Like, how did your book come to be about?
Yeah. So what happened was that after I, retired early, one of the things that I did was I started blogging. And so I have a blog called financiallyalert.com. And I was talking about these concepts of building wealth, financial freedom, financial independence. And I've had this for quite some time. But over time, occasionally you might get some press from other types of blogs, might send you links back or whatever, or different reporters might
Mhm.
find you. And I'm in a community where this is called FinCon Financial. It's a financial influencers conference that I typically go to.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the people in there kind of know each other and they collaborate. And so just being in that community, you start to kind of know who to contact if you want to get, some PR and whatnot. And in this case, actually, I didn't actually reach out, but it was probably due to a number of other steps that I did before where I at least had some exposure.
Yeah.
But what happened, it was a book publisher found me and they were actually out of the UK. So they emailed me and said, "Hey, would you like to write a book about fire? It looks like you've done this yourself." And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, yeah, actually, I have half of a book that I've started that I haven't finished. That would be fantastic." And we started talking, and this was actually right before COVID. And we started talking, we started kind of pushing ideas back and forth. And it just, one thing led to another. We started coming up with a concept. They still had to be pitched to some of their editorial team or whatnot, but everything kind of went through. And then ultimately, they ended up selling the rights to Simon and Schuster for the USA rights and whatnot.
Mm.
And it almost didn't happen because of COVID. But I was like, you know what? If we have some sort of a downturn in the economy, this is the best time to invest, right? And so we were able to convince
Mm.
them to push the book through anyways. And so, yeah, I was very fortunate and blessed that they kind of reached out and found me because typically, if you want to write a book with a traditional publisher, it's usually the other way around. You usually kind of go to them and then you have to pitch them the idea and sell it. Again, I was
Yeah.
very fortunate that they kind of came out and found me.
Well, I don't think that's like by mistake because I feel like a lot of times we plant seeds and we're
Mhm.
like doing things, even like your like bursts of inspiration to start a blog and like writing. Like, I'm sure all of that prepared you to get to where you are today. So, kudos to you. That's awesome. And when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, this guy's got to be a coach. Like before I even read the bio, I was just like looking and I was like, oh, I love that he's asking all these powerful questions and he's like asking you what the cost of not doing the FIRE route is. And I was like, this guy's got to be a coach. So tell me, like, how did you become a coach?
Yeah, great question. Well, because of the blog, because I'm talking about personal finances, naturally people, when they find it, they start asking you questions. And so I was like, well, I could probably help people by, doing some financial coaching. And so I just threw up a little page on the website and, people started, asking. So I created a coaching package and whatnot. I think for me, as I was going through, I was mentioning that I went through this whole personal development training myself. you know, one of the things that I realized along that journey was really being able to help someone else was so fulfilling, and being able to help
Mm.
them move through that space of, not taking action and being afraid and having those fears. And listeners, I mean, think about this if this is true for you, but a lot of times you know what to do, right? It's not like any complex calculus to figure out how to, build wealth, right? You have to save and invest more than you spend, right? But then if
Mm.
everyone knows that, why is it that we don't do that? And it usually comes back to the mindset. It comes back to the beliefs. It comes back to some of the habits. And so as a coach, I have the opportunity to kind of, peel back those, become conscious about what that looks like, what's holding them back, and then ultimately allowing them to kind of move forward. And once you kind of give them momentum and you let them kind of go off and sail, it's the most fulfilling thing, I think, as you know, as a coach, right? To kind of see your clients just take off. That's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I love that segue into just asking if somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, oh, I'm like in so much debt, or have credit card debt, or I have student loan debt, or I make so little. Like, this sounds great, but this is just a dream. This can never be my reality. Do you have any like words of inspiration or even stories of someone in that scenario who's made it to FIRE?
Yeah. And if you look at the book, right, I actually start with mindset first. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we think about, when we grow up in our lives, I was very blessed, as you know, that I had these role models in my life, but most people don't have that. And actually, that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was because I wanted to be able to give back to people that didn't have that. And so part of the first step is believing that you can do it. So, how do
Mm-hmm.
you start to believe that you can do something that you don't believe you can do? Well, I feel that a lot of people that make that transition, they put themselves at least in the presence or the ideas of something different than they're used to, right? And then, even though they may not believe it, right, they at least might begin to get inspired by someone who's already done it. And maybe it's someone that didn't, come from a privileged background, right? And in some cases, I think I was privileged, right? But there's plenty of cases or plenty of stories, right, of other people that have done it that didn't have that privilege, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you can get inspired by their story and realize that, okay, these are the steps that they took, then you can go back and say, okay, well, this is just a story I'm telling myself. That doesn't mean that I can't do it myself. And all of a sudden, you start kind of taking out the legs of your old belief, and then
Yeah.
you start trying new things, right? And if you try something and maybe you're like, all right, let me just knock out this one piece of debt that I have, right? I don't know if Dave Ramsey has his baby
The
steps, right?
snowball.
Yeah, the snowball, right?
Yeah.
And let's just say you knock out one, maybe it's your car loan or whatever it may be, right? The highest interest rate, or maybe the smallest debt that's sitting there, and you just knock it out and
Mm-hmm.
you get that win, right? When you celebrate that win, all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I can actually do this. The key
Mm-hmm.
then is to double down, right? Step into that momentum, keep pushing through, and as you do that, you'll start to get a new belief, because you're starting to get new legs to stand on a new belief. And the great thing about that is, as you kind of work through debt, that exact cycle, that exercise of paying down things, is the exact same thing that you need to do in order to invest. It's the same exact motion. And in some ways, investing is easy. Once you get rid of the debt and you start investing, you can kind of put it in autopilot. And the great thing is, when you have it in autopilot, you don't necessarily miss it.
Yeah, I really love that whole system. And something that I think helps me a lot too, because I'm really competitive, is even gamifying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember when I was in my 20s, I had like $0 in my bank account. And I don't know where this number came from, but I was like, the day I graduate from college, because I was working part time, I want to have $50,000 in my bank account. And I downloaded Mint. I guess Mint is gone. It's like Credit Karma now. But I like obsessed myself with the app. Like every day I would check it. And it was just so fun to see it like grow even $1 or like $5. And I was like, oh, like because they have like a chart too. And I was like, oh, it's growing. And by the time I graduated from college, I had $50,000 in my bank account over the 4 years, because I just saved. So like I turned it into a game. Instead of like spending this on nachos, I was like, oh, let me just like eat my ramen and like let me see how I can save this for something bigger. So I really like the whole belief and starting with that mindset, and also finding the proof that it's possible. And then if it helps you guys to like gamify it, try to gamify it. I don't know if that helps you at all. Like, have you ever gamified money?
Oh, absolutely. All the time. And actually, at a
Oh,
certain
tell me
point,
more.
it literally just becomes a game. But what I
Yeah.
really love about what you said, Emily, is that, again, as you're trying to build this new belief, right, you need to put yourself in a position where you're going to have some fun, right? If you feel like this is going to be a terrible experience, if you feel like you're just cutting back for no good reason, right, you're never going to be able to continue that action, because we're just naturally
Mm-hmm.
to like not put ourselves into constant pain, right? But if we can make it
Yeah.
fun all of a sudden, right, then absolutely we can build them momentum. We can do it time and time again. And I love that you built that $50,000 like incredible nest egg at that young age. That's amazing. Kudos to you. That's
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. When you set a goal and then you reach it, I think that just unlocks so much of like, well, if I can do this, then what else can I do? And I think that's, to me, that's the fun part of FIRE, is like just blowing your own dang mind, like blowing your expectations out of the water, because it takes a lot of discipline and like dedication, but also belief in yourself and the narratives and the stories, like you said, to create a life, a career, a relationship, a body that you like really love and cherish. So I love all of that. Now, tell me, if anyone feels ashamed right now of their financial situation, what kind of advice would you share with them?
Yeah. I think the number one thing is that you're not alone. Actually, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
majority of people, especially in the westernized society that we live in, they live paycheck to paycheck. There's like 78% or so that live paycheck to paycheck. And so it's not, anything personally about you. It's just the way that you've grown up, the information that you've absorbed. And again, it comes back to some of these things are not taught in a traditional school, right? It's not even barely touched at all whatsoever. And it's unfortunate, but because we don't know how to use this tool of money, right, we're just left to figure out how to use it on our own. And for most of us, we're left to just watch what our parents have done or our guardians or people around us. And because the
Mm-hmm.
majority of them are just doing it paycheck to paycheck or they're getting into debt, then that's what we know. So I would say that if you find yourself there, don't beat yourself up. It's okay. That's where a lot of people start. And there's a lot of people that are able to get out of that and to do incredibly well. And I would say that one of the other things that I want you to adjust your belief is that sometimes people are like, well, I'm just never destined to be rich. It's not for me. I'll
Mm.
never figure it out. Right. Being able to get to a certain level of wealth where you have financial independence is really actually it doesn't take that long. I think a lot of people think, oh, this is going to take me like decades and decades and decades. I've seen people do it as short as 5 years, but realistically 10 to 15 years, which might sound like a long time to maybe some of your younger listeners, but it's actually not that long of a time when you start to factor in the compound interest that starts to take effect once you start building, once you start placing those seeds into the ground. It's amazing what will happen. And I'll just share a quick story that, I started learning a lot of these concepts about building wealth early on. And this is even before I had my company. I had my first job ever out of school. And I started investing right away. And I started
Mm.
investing. And it was right around the time of 9/11 when we had a downturn in the economy. And then for the next 10 years, I kept investing. Every year I'd be investing the max, whatever contribution was to my Roth IRA. I'd be investing, taking out and putting into other traditional types of accounts, investment accounts. And over the next 10 years, the stock market was actually down and then flat. So we literally did not
Yeah.
see any returns. And it's like, why am I investing, right? Over this last
Yeah.
8 or 9 years. And I was like, well, I know over the long term, something's going to change and turn. And so what I'll tell you is that over the next 10 years after that, things went nuts and then it went exponential. And all of a sudden, all those seeds that I had set that really didn't look like they were doing anything, all of a sudden exploded. And then you're like, oh my
Mm.
goodness, I could have never created this amount of wealth had I not first set those seeds and just been patient. I think that's the other piece of this
Yeah.
too, is that you need a little bit of patience to, kind of put that investment into the oven and let it get to that perfect brown. You don't want to take it out and keep messing with it, right? You just want to kind of let it sit there, simmer,
Yeah.
get its nice crust. And when it's time, you take it out and you're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing.
So it's like auto deposit it and then go fishing.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoy that because I don't know if you've read the book A Simple Path to Wealth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm so excited to announce my 3-day How to Land Your Dream Job Bootcamp is back. And we're kicking off on June 25th. I'm going to go live and break down how to land your dream job. So if you know this is the year that you need to make a career move, you want to learn how to stand out in the job market, you want to feel confident with everything that you're doing from A to Z of the job search. You really want to have more ease and flow and joy in your job search. And you want to make sure that you're not wasting time, but what you're doing is actually yielding results, then come join me in the bootcamp. I'll link it in the show notes, www.cultivate.com/bootcamp. It's a free 3-day masterclass. Sign up, join us. Let's inject some fresh energy and get you to the other side. And if you know you want to work together beyond the 3 days, you have heard about the Happily Heard formula or you're intrigued by it, and you just know you want expert support in getting you to the other side so that you can find a job that gives you more income, more impact, more alignment, then you're going to want to join the Happily Heard formula, and you'll learn more about it during the bootcamp. I'll be opening up enrollment on the very last day with some really epic bonuses and discounts in play. And I hope that you can join us for the last cohort of 2024. Okay, that one is like such a great book because I think in there they showed like a historical chart of the S&P 500, and it's like exactly what you just shared. Like if you zoom out all the way, like the market is only going up, 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 up. So it doesn't really matter like when you're investing. In the long run, like 10 years from today, you would have wished that you invested today. So it's never too late to start, is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. It's never too late. And the great thing is that there's multiple ways to reach FIRE. One of the things that I write about in my book, The FIRE Planner, is you can invest passively. If you're interested in that, definitely read The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. It's a great book that helps explain what you just said. Literally just auto taking out a certain portion of your income, investing it into a index fund. And all an index fund is a basket of stocks that allows you to diversify and invest in the entire stock market or a portion thereof. And if you literally just put it there and let time do its thing, I mean, it's just amazing the returns that you'll get over time. But beyond that, that does take a little bit of time because you're going to have to, work with decades to let that kind of grow. But beyond that, you can also invest into real estate. And so that's one of the other FIRE accelerators where, if that's something that you're interested in, you can buy a piece of real estate up front. And if you buy it well, that can pay you cash flow into perpetuity as well. And then the third one is building your own business. And that's something that I think that a lot of people, think that maybe they can't do. But I would say, hey, here's another belief maybe you can, challenge. Maybe you can.
Yeah.
What do you do well at your current position that you could apply to your own business? What kind of value can you put out into the market that some would like or enjoy or get value from? And, just see, right? You never know. And there's so many, I obviously am in a space where I know lots of different entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But I think just being able to kind of know that you went out and tried it, you might surprise yourself.
Yeah. And I always say, like, if an employer is paying you now for your services and your skills, you could start a business because you could take that service and skill and make it work for you. And I always try to impress upon my clients that you need to look at yourself as Me Inc. or like Me Incorporated, because you are your own brand. You have your own billboard with your LinkedIn profile or whatever it is that you start. But I think a lot of like, this was my case. I always thought like a business had to have like seed funding or investors, or you had to like be the next Google or Facebook. And like, you just had to like have a product. But there's so many crazy businesses out there that like, I have a friend who makes 6 figures a year selling dog biscuits, and she has like a blog on how to make dog biscuits. And I'm like, if she could do that, you could literally do anything in this world.
So true. So true. I've got a friend that sells fanny packs and has an 8-figure business. It's amazing. Like what people can do, right? And the small little niches that you can create and carve out for yourself.
Yeah. What's special about these fanny packs? I'm curious.
I was asking the same thing of my friend. What it is that there's lots of music festivals that people go to. They take fanny packs apparently, and then they check them out in all these different patterns and colors and whatever else. And it's quite popular.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you have a value, to offer, like something that you're doing to make somebody's life easier, better, faster, cheaper, you can monetize that. All right, so I actually have some questions for you. The 4% rule. Can you explain that to our listeners today?
Sure. So the 4% rule is what it is it's kind of like a metric that we use in the FIRE movement to kind of figure out when you're so-called financially independent. And all that means is that when you have enough assets allocated to your investment accounts, and when you're ready to pull it out, can you pull out 4% of that for the rest of your life into perpetuity? That's all the 4%
Mm-hmm.
rule is saying. Now, the reverse of that, if you kind of flip some of the math, in order to figure out what your FIRE number is, you can take your annual expenses, and let's just say, for example, you had $100,000 of expense every year, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
need $100,000 of passive income for the year. How much would you need in order to so-called satisfy the 4% rule? Well, what you can do is you can do a multiplier by 25 to figure out what that number looks like. So if it was $100,000 and you multiply it by 100,000, then you got the 2.5 million. So that's going to be the nest egg that you're going to have is that once you have $2.5 million in assets in these accounts, then you can safely take off 4% every single year and live on that. And in between that, yeah, you might be drawing down some principal, but you're also going to be still growing your portfolio. So over time, you should theoretically be only drawing down enough, where you'd still have enough in there till you're 100 or whatever it is. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a general rule of thumb that people use. It's not necessarily perfect, but it's a nice kind of just metric point that you can use, a guiding kind of tool. And here's the cool thing,
Yeah.
Emily, is that, you know what? Some people don't need to live on $100,000 a year. That could be a lot of money to
Mm-hmm.
some people, or it could be not a lot of money to some people. The cool thing about FIRE is that you can figure out what that number looks like for you. If you can live
Yeah.
on $50,000 a year, then great. Then you can chop that number in half, right? Then you only need
Mm-hmm.
the 1.75 million.
Two
Sorry,
five.
25,
Mm-hmm.
1.25. I can't do math on the fly. So yeah, you only need the 1.25, right? And all of a sudden, then it's not, oh, okay, I don't need $2.5 million. I only need 1.25. And you can kind of graduate it and kind of mess with the numbers in the sense that there's these different levers in FIRE that we're constantly looking at, right? What are my expenses, my primary expenses, right? It's going to be our mortgage or our rent, right? What are our food costs? What are automobile costs or travel costs? And, if you really start to look at it, a lot of people in the FIRE space have decided, it's not really worth it for me to live in a high cost living area, right? So why don't I move somewhere else, especially in this day and age where you can work remotely, right? All of a sudden, you get some
Mm-hmm.
arbitrage in terms of, where you potentially live and the amount that you get paid. And you can take that extra savings and put it into your investment accounts, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a great thing about FIRE is it's really personalized to you, right? If you need the 2.5 million, great. If you only need the, let's say 1.25, great. If you need less than that, if you need more than that, maybe some people want to live in extravagant and their number is, much larger. Fantastic. But it's really relative to you. And
Yeah.
the one thing I will say about the FIRE movement, Emily, though, that I would caution is that sometimes I would say the FIRE community goes a little too far in the sense that they say, okay, scrimp, 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 save everything, right? To the point where it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, you don't have your lattes, you don't have your whatever else. The challenge with that, and the reason I don't necessarily subscribe to that myself, is that I believe that it's a much more enjoyable life to have a mindset of abundance rather than minimalism. Now, if that lights
Mm-hmm.
you up, then have at it. But you have to choose for yourself what's right for you. In my case, I choose abundance. And what I mean by abundance is that I'd rather focus on my income because I can just keep that has no limit, right? But you can only save so much until you're literally, getting rid of your car, then you have a bike, you get rid of your bike, and then you're just
Mm-hmm.
walking everywhere. And if that's what you want to do, fine. That's not how I want to live specifically. So you want to understand for
Yeah.
you what are your values, make sure that it's in alignment with that. And then you can craft your fire number and make sure that it meets, the way that you want to live when you finally get to that fire number.
Yeah, so good. I don't know if you've heard these different fires, like lean fire, chubby fire, fat fire.
Mhm.
What can you explain the different fires and what the definitions are of each?
Yeah, there's a few different ones right now. One of them is called Coast Fire, and Coast Fire is
Mm-hmm.
essentially you've put in a good chunk of, let's just call, seed capital into your investment accounts, and you know that by the time you're 65, it's going to grow to a point where you can retire comfortably. That's kind of Coast Fire, where you know that you've got enough already invested that you'll be okay. And then Lean Fire is where you've accumulated enough at this point where it's covering just your basics, right? It's covering maybe your mortgage and maybe some of your, I don't know, your dining or
Your basic
basic,
necessities,
exactly,
but you're
basic
not like
necessities.
enjoying.
Yes,
You're
yes,
you're
yes.
getting
Hence the
by.
lean, right? So it's just the
Yeah.
basics and necessities, right? And then you got kind of the regular fire that covers the majority of everything, but nothing extravagant. Then you got fat
Yeah.
fire. Okay, well, you want extra to have to invest more to do
You want first class seats.
exactly. Yeah. And so there's a whole proponent of fat
Yeah.
fire, which fat fire can, it's a pretty big spectrum on what that looks like.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of like the ideal of fat fire in some senses, just because a lot of times the people that are in the fat fire space are looking a little bit more about an abundance mindset versus kind of a
Mhm.
minimalist mindset. But
Yeah, I really agree with all of your philosophy too, because I think for me, I'm chubby fire. Like, I don't need to like go travel the world on first class tickets. I'm okay with like economy or even like business class tickets every once in a while. But like what I've really done is I've calculated my exact expenses, like my monthly budget, my annual budget. Okay, this is what I need if I'm lean firing, but here's like what I would need to like really enjoy and savor and appreciate life. And here's the things that I don't want to forego because I'm just trying to be frugal and live like so minimally that I'm not really enjoying life. And what I found is like that number does not add that much more to the budget each year, but it's very empowering to like do the calculations and allow yourself to sit there and dream and like really think about what it is, because I think a lot of times we don't have the number, so we just think, oh, that's not obtainable. Other people can do it or other people can have it, but I'm not rich, so I can't do it. But the number really isn't that large sometimes or that different from the lean fire number. Which I have a follow-up question to this, which, okay, personally, this is something that I've had a hard time coming to terms with, and I want to get your thoughts on it. I finally got my answer, but I want to hear your answer. So, for a long time, I have been operating from scarcity, like just thinking things are not enough, so I have to always hoard money. And then I did like a bunch of money mindset coaches, money mindset books, and I was like, okay, I got to like think bigger and allow myself to be more abundant, which is what you talked about earlier. And so then I found myself like, okay, maybe if I actually like splurge on this nice designer bag, like I'll be more abundant and I'll attract more. And the question that came to me was, what's the difference between being financially irresponsible versus abundant mindset of like knowing, okay, if I buy this luxurious thing that like I'm being abundant, but I'm also being financially responsible.
yeah, that's a phenomenal question, Emily. And I think for me, the difference is between being financially irresponsible and kind of, splurging on what you want. I think it all comes down to intentionality. So what I mean by that is
Yes.
like, let's just say you have your budget, right? You said you had your budget, right? And you're allocating, certain things to different, areas. I think it's totally fine to have a portion of your budget for things that, are financially just your fun, right? So it could be a designer
Mm-hmm.
handbag, things that light you up, things that you value, right? And I want people actually to spend money on things that they love. I spend a ton of money on food, as I told you before. I'm a bit of a foodie, right? And so I'll spend lots of money on food, on Michelin star restaurants or whatnot. And some people say that's a huge waste of money. And it's like, well, maybe to you, and you shouldn't do that
Yeah.
because you don't value it. But for me, I value that, right? Now,
Mm.
I think the question becomes, okay, when does it become financially irresponsible versus, just kind of splurging and enjoying? Well, I think if it's outside of your budget and you're going into debt to do that, or to just do it maybe to get a temporary feeling of satisfaction, or maybe not even for yourself, but just to kind of show someone else, hey, look, what I'm doing, then I think that's where it kind of borders along the lines of financial, partially irresponsibility, but also not in alignment with your values, right?
Mm.
And so I think there's a danger in that as well. So there's two pieces, right? You want to
Yeah.
operate within financial alignment of your true values that really light you up, right? So maybe
Yeah.
that's traveling, that's having an experience or whatnot. And actually, that's a good point. So a lot of people will be like, okay, well, I want to have these experiences with my family while I'm young and my family's young and whatnot. And I want to go out and I want to have these experiences. So I'm going to splurge on this, right? So is that financially irresponsible? Well, if you have a budget of, let's say, $5,000 and you spend 10, then I would say probably, right? Because you've gone outside of your budget that you've already kind of created. And the better question is, could you create a similar experience, within that budget? And usually the answer is yes. Maybe you think it's
Mm.
not. I would challenge you to say, maybe you can create that. And on the flip side, let's just say you had a budget of the $5,000 and you had this huge excess surplus in your budget of, I can splurge on whatever, then if you want to allocate to that budget, then go ahead, right? It's not going to really move the needle in terms of that budget pot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, where were you 2 years ago? You would have saved me so much like inner turmoil because your answer is what I've come to the conclusion of, but it's taken me 2 years to like finally piece this together. And I love what you shared there because I agree. It's like first starting with what are your aligned values? Because I realized like with the designer handbag example, I had friends who were buying designer handbags and I was like, oh, maybe I should do that too because they're doing it and they're successful. And I realized when I bought the bag, I just had buyer's remorse. Like I don't even wear the bag today. It's like sitting in my shelf collecting dust. Well, it's actually in a dust bag that they give, but like it didn't really bring me joy. But now I realize like my true values is I will pay for health. Like I think health is one of the most important things. So like I will pay for a smoothie, whereas like somebody who doesn't value that might be like, oh, you're wasting money. Experiences. And yeah, so like I have my main money categories that like I value these and I will spend my money on this. Like education is a big one for me. Like I will drop $15,000 on a coaching program. Whereas like if you tell me that like car is 15,000, I'd be like, no thanks, I'm gonna go with that Prius that's like 10,000. It's just like what you value. And then the second is, can you afford it? And I think my downfall was I didn't have budgets for different things. I just had one big checking account, one big saving account, one big retirement account. But now I'm like, oh, okay, if I make this much money, I need to pay out myself first. Then I need to put this percentage towards retirement. Then I need to put this percentage towards taxes. And then all this fun money. Like, yeah, what are those different categories that I value that I can put money towards and then live within the confines of that? So thank you for sharing that. That makes so much sense to me. And I also want to get your thoughts on Die with Zero. Do you know about this principle?
I do. Die with Zero is a book by a gentleman named Bill Perkins. And so the whole premise, as you said, Emily, is that sometimes when let's just say we go on the FIRE movement, let's say, right? And we start to build this incredible nest egg. And by the time we finally actualize this nest egg, so to speak, and we're there, we've spent so much time in scarcity sometimes kind of building that, getting ourselves there, that it's difficult to have that mindset shift to actually start spending the money, right? And
Mm.
so sometimes we might just keep accumulating. And then do you really want to become like Scrooge McDuck, the miser, right? In A Christmas Tale, right? Where he's like, at the end, he has all this money, but he's miserable, right? And
Yeah.
so using money again as a tool to create enhancements in your life that are aligned with your values. Again, for me, what that means is, creating experiences for people. That's contributing to things that are important to me. Like you said, one of the things for me too, as well, is like, personal development and enrolling into things that are going to enhance my growth, programs, education, that are going to allow me to grow. And so I think what's interesting with Die with Zero is that he talks about how to really optimize this so that you ultimately die with zero. And I think it's kind of like the 4% rule. It's like kind of like a benchmark idea,
Mm.
right, where you kind of die with
Yeah.
zero. For me, I'm a little bit more conservative, so I'm never going to die with zero, and I want to leave a legacy for my kids. At the same time, he brings a very valid point in that, again, we want to be very intentional with how we spend our money. And I think we do that from day one, right now, even as we're building the wealth, so that you understand what it is that you're building for and what that means
Mm.
present day, what that means when you hit your FIRE number, and what that means after you hit your FIRE number. And it's like anything else in life, right? There's this kind of balance, right? It's kind of an art and kind of a skill. And so I feel
Yeah.
very blessed that my parents, my mom was incredibly great at spending money. And so I saw her spending money
Mm.
freely, right? And my dad, on the other side, he actually liked to save money, right? And he would never spend it. He was quite the
Yeah.
opposite. So I got the
Mm.
dichotomy of the two. And I feel like
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in between, which I certainly enjoy the money to a certain extent. Like I said, whatever food experiences, education, things of that nature. And again, it really comes back to intentionality. So I would caution, I guess, maybe actually, as the title says, dying with zero. I don't think he really means to die with zero. And he kind of says that in the book as well. But more importantly, he's trying to say, make sure that you're, enjoying what you've built for yourself. What's the point of
Yeah.
building, a house, a beautiful house and a beautiful structure if you're not going to enjoy it, right?
Right.
If you're in this scarcity mindset, then he's just saying, it's going to be all for nothing in some ways, right? So I think it's just a cautionary tale. So I like the idea. I don't know if I'd follow it to a T, but it's a good reminder that there's a balance.
Yeah, I love that. And can you share with us, because you have two kids, like, what is your philosophy on the legacy you want to leave? Do you want, so I hear so many parents that are like on two ends of the spectrum, right? It's like, I grew up in poverty and I never want to see my kids struggle or have them have like a burden. So I'm going to set them up with a nest egg. And then there's others that are like, no, I made it to where I am today because I had to learn the hardships and the struggles and didn't have the silver spoon and the trust fund. So like I learned how to get all the resilience and the hard work ethic and all of that. So I'm just curious what your philosophy is as a parent.
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily. And it's an answer that has evolved over time. So I will
Mm.
say that initially, my idea was to, completely pay for my kids' education, help them out with their first house, whatever it may be, right? Kind of give them, everything, all the advantages that I could give them because I'm able to.
Mm.
And as I started kind of going on this, journey of, reflection and understanding and just listening to other people that had money and what they're thinking, I started encountering what you just said. It's like, well, if you give them everything, right, and then they don't know how to fend for themselves, then you're really doing them a disservice. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot
Mm.
of sense. So how we've structured it now is some of our estate planning is we've peeled back and pushed out some of the dates where they would inherit some things if I'm not around, right? They would
Mm.
inherit things later on in life after they've already established themselves. Um, Instead of paying for all of their college, we're going to supplement it and allow them to have some skin in the game is what I'm trying to get at. And
Mm-hmm.
when they do that, I think you're, a little bit more committed to that outcome that you're trying to pursue. And then just even as parents right now, even though I think they know that we're, quite comfortable or whatever, right? It's not we don't necessarily live extravagantly, right? Certain times, right? Maybe some of the experiences or whatnot. But part of it, I think, is keeping them humble enough to know that, hey, this is not just like, a given, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of figure out how you're going to contribute. And at the same time, I also want them to understand that money is his game, is his game, is
Mm-hmm.
his tool that you have to learn how to use. And if you can learn how to use it early on, you're not going to have to deal with some of the struggles that a lot of people go through. So trying to give them that balance of humility plus intelligence plus the desire to, I guess, grow and contribute on their own outside of knowing that they're going to, inherit a certain amount of money. It's a little bit, again, of an art and a skill, but I think it really does
Yeah.
come down to that balance. And it's, if you ask me again, a couple of years later, it might change, but this is kind of where I'm at currently.
Yes.
So I don't want to give them everything, right? I want
Yeah.
them to be able to figure things out on their own and not have to ever feel like they're, just like, I don't want them to turn into spoiled brats, is what I'm getting
Yes.
at.
Yeah, I think you and I share a similar philosophy, and mine is continuously going to evolve, I'm sure, as well. But I am like a big believer in like just how you shared, like the only reason why you went on this personal growth journey is because you like had this mission and this goal to like kind of keep up leveling. And I feel like for me, I want my kids to, they're already so privileged compared to the way that I grew up. So at the same time, I think I want them to experience hardships. I want them to experience struggle. I want them to like find their own resiliency and their own answers and pave their own way. But I think right now where I've kind of landed is depending on their personality and their interest, I want them to select a career because it's what they genuinely are connected to. Because, like, for me, I remember when I was in college, I thought I wanted to be a social worker until I saw they made $36,000 a year. And I was like, the only reason why I didn't go down that path is because I didn't want to make $36,000 a year. But, like, if they want to be like a philanthropist or like a social worker or, somebody that doesn't get paid very well, but that's like what they really love and like what they're here to do on this planet, then I would be more like willing to be like, okay, well, here's like your down payment. Here's the things that will allow you to stop stressing about finances and only working for money. But again, that's like such a privileged place to be. But I also think like that's part of my mission and like it's become my why of like why I even want to go down this FIRE path to begin with. Like, what is the legacy that I want to leave? What do I want to create for my kids? What do I want to give to my kids? But I completely agree about not creating spoiled brats that are like so dependent and don't know how to handle money, don't know how to solve their problems. So that's the balance for sure.
Yeah. I like to celebrate
Yeah.
whenever they get into problems and they have issues or they have challenges. I say, great. What did you learn? What are you doing about it?
Yeah.
Right? And just kind of throw it back to them. Yeah.
Yeah. I just have two more questions for you. So, in your book, you have so many different cool hacks. Maybe you can list them out like geo arbitrage, house hacking. Like, there's a whole lot of them. But I want to ask, like, what is your favorite one?
Ooh. I'll tell you one that's actually not in there currently that I think is
Ooh.
relevant today. And that is really leveraging technology to your advantage. We are on the cusp
Mm,
of like a ridiculous, technological revolution with AI. And the people
mm,
that are on top of this and are learning how to use it to your advantage and create better output are going to be the people that get ultimately, I think, paid the most and are going to create the most value in some senses for other people. And yes, there's going to be lots of jobs that, will somewhat go away, but you have to be willing to adapt. And I think we're in this transition right now. And so the reason why I bring that up is that anytime you have some sort of a disruption in technology, there's a huge opportunity to move ahead financially, whether it's starting up your own company, leveraging AI, whether it's, just getting better at producing output in your own work that you do currently
mm,
at work, or it frees up more time to do other things that you love. I think this is really a time that you should be paying attention to that, right? And not sitting on the sidelines, really understanding how to prompt is what the word is to figure out how to get a better output from the AI. And so I would
Yeah.
say leveraging technology, that's going to be the first one that I would recommend. Um,
Wow. I'm so scared for my future, Michael. Like, my parents, they ask me things like, how do you open the email on this phone? Or like, how do you send an attachment? And I've always helped them, like growing up. I was like their IT
mhm.
person. But like today, I'm pretty on top of like Instagram and TikTok and, all the apps. But things are changing so fast. And like, honestly, I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the updates and all the new tools and technology. I'm so scared I'm going to turn into my parents and being like, Ryan, Zoe, like, tell me how to work this thing. So I love your answer there because I almost feel like you have to stay on top of it so you don't fall behind. But it's just so quickly evolving. It's kind of frightening how fast new features come out and new technology tools come out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really rapid, and you're right. I mean, there's any belief like with anything like money or technology, right? It's like we can be scared of it, right? And in some senses, it could be right if you're scared of
Mm,
how fast it's moving, or if it will take
yeah.
away our jobs, right? But on the other side, there's so much opportunity because you can do things so
Mm,
much faster. You can figure out things so much quicker. It's like kind of like when Google first came out. I don't know if you remember when Google came out. You're probably
yeah.
too young, but when Google first came out and we started,
I think we're the same age, by the
you
way.
look much younger than I am, but
Oh, I'm 36.
okay, I'm 47.
Oh, wow.
See,
You do look young. People need to go to your Instagram now so they can be like, what? 47? Okay.
but yes, but when Google came out, people were like going nuts. And well, let's not even talk about Google. Let's just talk about the internet, right? People, when they finally started figuring out how to use it and leverage it, I mean, it literally changed the way that we do things. And it did take a while. We're talking about like a decade or more for things to really kind of snap into place. But with artificial intelligence, the trajectory of growth is exponential this time. And so that's all I'm saying. That
Mm,
you want to be just kind of aware of what's going on because then you
yeah.
can add it into your business. You can move faster. You can have it create your social media content stuff. You can, it's, I don't know if you've explored it at all, but some of the video stuff, you're not going to be able to tell who's real and who's not. It's getting pretty,
Yeah. It's kind of
it's a little
wild.
scary in some
Even
senses.
Google now
Yeah.
has AI built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, I honestly could talk to you all day because I'm like so passionate about FIRE and all these different money topics, but I know I want to be respectful of your time. So, where can people find you if they want to learn more? And where should they buy your book?
Sure. You can find the Fire Planner on Amazon. That's probably the easiest place to find it. And you
That's
can,
where I found it.
oh, perfect. Awesome. You can also find me online at financiallyalert.com. And yeah, from there, there's links to other places. I do a wealth builders mastermind for real estate investors. And I also just started a youth entrepreneurship summit that I'm going to be kicking off this summer. So if you have any teens that want to learn about business, yeah, come check us out. It's at youthentsummit.com. And we're going to be hosting that up in Vancouver, Canada this August.
Incredible. One day I'm going to send Ryan and Zoe
Yeah,
there.
that'd be
So keep
awesome.
running it, please. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your time today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Emily.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed it and you're not following me on social media already, come follow me and join the conversation on our latest post. I'm over at Cultivate, or you can visit our website, cultivate.com, and learn more. And don't forget to hit subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss another episode. I can't wait to connect with you again soon. Have a joyful day.